What's up guys, you're welcome back to Momo Bespoke. I want to use this video to explain some of the things that happened in last class where we created this pattern. I didn't explain how I got the apron, so I'm going to do that right now. And I want to also show you a few other things related to creating the holes. You see that in this one I radiated all of the apron holes, all of the stitching holes from that point in the front here. In this video I want to take it a little bit lower. So I want to reference the holes from points that are lower down that point and see whether they come out better. So we're going to do all of that, and there's quite a lot of other things that I want to show you, especially things about how to do the top line, this folded edge of the top line of your loafers. There's a lot I want to show you in this video, so you're better off sticking around to the end. Let's get on with the apron. So you guys know that ever since I learned this new method from my friend and brother Hussein Alao of Crystal Fit, I've been using the outsole pattern to create the apron. First of all, this is the medial side, right? So the last length of this last is 31.5 cm. That's the center line right there. So I typically like to start my apron from around about 1/8 from the feather edge on that center line, 1/8 of the last length. So 1/8 of the last length came to about 3.9, and that's basically 4 cm away from the feather edge. And then I'll place the center of the insole pattern and then basically trace it out. The way my friend Hussein Alao does his is that he cuts about 1 mm away, just around that edge, mark in the center line and place that there, and use that to draw in the curve. But I have found that it typically will not match up to the point where the joints start, and then you'd have to draw a straight line and connect it, and you'd have basically what you want to do all well done. I, on the other hand, have also not had any troubles whatsoever doing it without cutting away that 1 mm extra. And when I do it like this, typically more often than not, I find that it just goes to the same points. I would have a discussion with him when I go to visit him during Christmas, and we will discuss to find out if there's a reason why that happens and why that doesn't happen. But the point I'm making is, whether you reduce by 1 mm or not, you can actually use your insole pattern to get the apron of your apron loafers. For the stitching distances, the distances between the stitching holes, I typically will use about 6 to 7 mm, space them 6 to 7 mm apart. And like I mentioned the last time around, I radiated points of the holes from the tip of the tongue there. In this case, I want to radiate them from points that correspond to equal distances on this center line. I'm basically spacing it the same distances that I spaced the stitching holes themselves. So I marked about 7 mm spaces on that center line, and then I can basically radiate each to its corresponding point on that center line. You see, so draw in my lines this way and just keep going. You will notice that we will run out of corresponding points on the center line, and for that I just continue to radiate from that top point there until we finish out the entire thing. Now our holes will now be punched on these radiation lines. So if we are spacing the holes 1 mm apart from each other, you put 1 mm there, 1 mm on the other side, and you can just follow along on those radiation lines that you have, and those will be the reference points for punching in your hole. Now this basically is how I built this punch from an old toothbrush. You can try that or use any other thing that comes in handy. We who have to teach the craft have to find standardized ways of doing it. So this appears to be my own standardized way. In this second part of this video, I want to take just a few moments to talk to you about a few things that, you know, I have noticed and that I do when it comes to stitching, hand stitching of the apron. Now, that's not any different from any other type of hand stitching that you might do. But before we get into that, let me invite you to subscribe to the channel if you've not already done that. And we also invite you to become a member of the channel. Membership costs just about $1, something less than $1 really, and you pay that every month just to show your support. There are also quite a number of videos exclusive to members. You would find them in our video catalog. So before we start talking about stitching the aprons, this is the leather flap that we will use in the next part of this video. So that's going to be in part 3, so do make sure that you stick around to the end. So you see that I have punched all of the holes, and now let's get into the stitching itself. Now, the key thing you have to pay attention to with hand stitching, just like any other stitching, whether you're stitching with machine or by hand, is that you must get your tensioning. You must tension the thread correctly. But first of all, how much thread do I need? I like to have one loop at least twice the length of where I intend to stitch. So I was talking about tensioning. When you pull in the stitch, you'd have to tension it not too tightly and not too loose, right? So you pull and ensure that the loop of the stitch stays in between the stitch, and then you just pull snugly, not too tightly and not too loose. So when you're done, you pull one end out and lock the entire stitch. So let's talk about what we've been meaning to talk about, the folded edge of your stitch. The first thing I do is to divide the width of this whole strip by 2. You know that the entire width of this is the width of my ruler in the first place. So if you have this kind of ruler, that's it. You can actually just use that width. Then I'll place another line just about 7 mm into the strip itself. So the first line was a line basically dividing the strip into 2, and then this one is just 7 mm in. What that does is that this space in the middle forms the fold, and we can basically fold it the way that you saw. So let's go ahead and prepare the back seam here, and then we will go into the stitching proper, and you see how all of it turns out. Of course, don't forget that before you start installing that flap, you must first install cover up your back seam, right? So cover up your back seam, you stitch it into place so that that flap will ultimately fall on top of this back seam. Now let's install the flap. As you can see, I've added glue to the top line of the shoe itself and also to the corresponding part of the flap. So just following that guideline, you basically install the flap, cut out any excess that you may have, and basically just install it in that way. So this way you have enough material underneath the top line and then also you have enough material to which your lining can be installed onto. See all of the extra space that I kept at the top of the lining edges, so that there is no chance at all of the sewing machine not catching the stitches. So after stitching the lining in place, you fold over that flap, install your bow, and then stitch this all the way around that flap. And that of course will conclude the entire process. All that remains to be done is to do a test lasting. This is what our test lasting came up to, ladies and gentlemen. See you in the next video. Salute.